The screen glowed, a malevolent beacon in the dim light of our shared living room, illuminating the shattered fragments of my world. I remember the exact moment, the way the cheap plastic of his phone felt cold and slick in my trembling hand, a stark contrast to the inferno raging in my chest. It was a Tuesday night, a night like any other, or so I thought. Mark was in the shower, the rhythmic drumming of the water a mocking soundtrack to the silent scream building in my throat. He'd left his phone on the coffee table, face up, an oversight so careless it almost felt deliberate, a challenge daring me to look. And I did. My eyes snagged on the notification, a WhatsApp message from a name I didn't recognize. "Can't wait for round 2 tonight, baby. You were incredible." And beneath it, a photo. Not just any photo, but one of Mark, shirtless, undeniably in someone else's bed, a smug, satisfied smirk on his face. My stomach lurched, a violent, visceral twist that threatened to bring up everything I'd eaten that day. The air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, not with tears yet, but with a sudden, overwhelming haze of disbelief. This wasn't happening. Not Mark. Not us. We were the couple everyone envied, the ones who had it all figured out, the ones destined for forever. Our apartment, filled with the warmth of our shared life, suddenly felt like a mausoleum, every object a tombstone for a love that had apparently died a slow, agonizing death I was too blind to see. The shower stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic thump-thump-thump of my own heart against my ribs. It felt like a trapped bird, desperate to escape my chest. I heard his footsteps approaching, light and carefree, utterly oblivious to the apocalypse he was about to walk into. A cold dread, sharper than any knife, began to spread through my veins, replacing the initial shock with a brittle, icy calm. My fingers, still clutching his phone, felt numb. The image on the screen, a grotesque masterpiece of betrayal, was burned into my retinas. I wanted to scream, to rage, to smash the phone, to smash *him star. But a strange stillness descended upon me. It was the calm before the storm, the quiet before the detonation. He walked into the living room, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist, a smile playing on his lips. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice husky, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way I used to find so endearing. Now, it was just another layer of deception. He reached for his phone, and that's when his eyes landed on the screen, on the incriminating message, on the damning photo. The smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic, then a mask of carefully constructed innocence. "What's this?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight, too casual. I didn't say a word. I just held the phone out to him, my hand steady, my gaze unwavering, letting the screen do all the talking. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard, thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter taste of a love irrevocably poisoned. In that moment, a seed of something dark and potent took root in the desolate garden of my heartbreak, a desire for not just closure, but for a justice so precise, so poetic, it would echo in his miserable life forever. He stammered, a pathetic, incoherent stream of denials and half-truths tumbling from his lips, each word a fresh insult to the intelligence he clearly thought I lacked. It's nothing, babe, just a joke. A friend playing a prank. You know how Greg is." His eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine, a telltale sign of the lie he was spinning. The sheer audacity of it, the effortless way he tried to gaslight me, ignited a cold, furious fire in my gut. My initial shock had morphed into a searing rage, but it was a quiet rage, one that simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over but held in check by a terrifying new clarity. A prank. I finally managed to articulate, my voice surprisingly steady, almost a whisper. It was the kind of whisper that cuts deeper than any shout. "With a photo of you, shirtless, in someone else's bed, captioned 'Can't wait for round 2 tonight, baby?'" I held his gaze, forcing him to meet my eyes, to see the devastation he had wrought. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. The carefully constructed mask of innocence crumbled, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. He knew he was caught. The air in the room crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I could practically taste the betrayal. Every memory, every shared laugh, every tender moment we'd ever had, flashed before my eyes, tainted, corrupted, reduced to a cruel mockery. Our entire relationship felt like a meticulously crafted illusion, and now the curtain had been ripped away, revealing the shoddy stagecraft and the deceitful puppeteer behind it all. I felt a profound sense of foolishness, of having been utterly duped. It was a humiliation that burned even hotter than the heartbreak. He tried to reach for me, a pathetic attempt at comfort or perhaps a desperate plea for forgiveness. I recoiled as if burned, stepping back, putting distance between us. The thought of his touch, after seeing that photo, made my skin crawl. "Don't," I said, the single word laced with a venom I didn't know I possessed. "Don't you dare touch me." My voice was still low, but it held an edge of steel. He visibly flinched. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, was a stranger, a grotesque caricature of the person I had built my future around. The tears finally came then, hot and stinging, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. Tears for the wasted years, for the trust shattered beyond repair, for the future that had just evaporated into thin air. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not the charming, loving partner I had adored, but a weak, deceitful coward. And in that moment, the rage solidified into something cold, sharp, and resolute. It wasn't enough for him to just feel remorse. He had to feel pain. He had to understand the magnitude of what he had done, not just intellectually, but viscerally. A dark, exquisite thought began to form in the recesses of my mind, a whisper of a plan that promised not just vindication, but a devastatingly poetic justice. It was a thought born of pain, nurtured by betrayal, and fueled by an unholy desire for retribution. He had built his betrayal on lies and secrecy. I would build my revenge on exposure and manipulation. He had played a cruel game. I would play a better, far more brutal one. He had no idea the storm he had unleashed. And I, the woman he had so carelessly discarded, would be its architect. The game, as they say, was officially on. And I intended to win. The ensuing days were a blur of raw emotion and calculated composure. I locked myself away, not in a fetal position of despair, but in a cocoon of simmering strategizing. Mark, in a display of what I can only describe as audacious idiocy, tried to apologize, to beg, to explain away the undeniable. Each pathetic attempt only fueled my resolve. He'd leave flowers on the doorstep, send long, rambling texts filled with empty promises, even try to corner me when I finally ventured out for groceries. His desperation was a balm to my wounded ego, a small satisfaction, but nowhere near enough. I responded with a wall of ice, a silence more punishing than any tirade. My face was a mask of cold indifference, my eyes devoid of the warmth he once knew, reflecting only the icy determination that had taken root within me. I spent hours pacing, staring blankly at the walls, but my mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. The initial, chaotic thoughts of smashing his car or publicly shaming him on social media quickly gave way to something far more insidious, something that would target his core vulnerabilities. Mark prided himself on his image, his success, his charm, his effortless ability to win people over. He was a social chameleon, thriving on admiration and the perception of being a good, stand-up guy. That was his Achilles heel. My revenge wouldn't be about physical harm or fleeting public ridicule. It would be about dismantling his carefully constructed world, piece by excruciating piece, from the inside out. The idea, when it finally coalesced, hit me like a lightning bolt, illuminating the dark corners of my vengeful heart. It was elegant in its simplicity, brutal in its potential impact, and utterly perfect in its poetic justice. He had cheated with another woman. Fine. But what if his next romantic entanglement, the one he thought would be his escape, became his ultimate downfall? What if the very act of moving on, of finding new pleasure, led him directly into a trap of his own making? And what if the person who set that trap was me? I started by subtly gathering intelligence. Not overt stalking, but quiet observation. I knew his routines, his haunts, his weaknesses. I also knew his type: confident, attractive, a little bit mysterious. He was drawn to people who challenged him, but not too much. And he had a particular weakness for a certain kind of playful flirtation. This wasn't about finding a girl to set him up with. It was about finding the right girl. Someone who could charm him, disarm him, and then, at the precise moment, deliver the fatal blow. My mind immediately went to Sarah. Sarah, who I knew through a mutual friend, was a force of nature. Beautiful, intelligent, and utterly fearless. She also happened to be openly bisexual, something Mark, in his narrow-minded heteronormativity, was completely oblivious to. He was the kind of guy who would assume any attractive woman he met was automatically interested in him, and only him, in the traditional sense. This was my leverage. This was the exquisite twist that would make the revenge truly sing. The thought of orchestrating this, of pulling the strings from the shadows, filled me with a strange, dark exhilaration. It was a macabre game of chess, and I, the betrayed pawn, was about to become the queen. The planning began in earnest, meticulously, like a master craftsman honing a deadly weapon. Every detail had to be perfect, every step calculated. This wasn't just about hurting him, it was about making him understand the depth of his transgression, making him feel the sting of his own deceit, magnified 1,000-fold. And the best part? He wouldn't even see it coming. He would walk right into it, a willing participant in his own undoing. The first step was to discreetly re-establish contact with Sarah. We hadn't spoken much beyond casual greetings at group events in a while, but I knew her reputation for being sharp, witty, and possessing a healthy disdain for entitled men. She was also fiercely loyal to her friends, and though we weren't close, I trusted her judgment and her moral compass. This wasn't about manipulating an innocent party, it was about finding an accomplice, someone who would understand the nuances of the situation and, perhaps, even relish the opportunity for a little well-deserved mischief. I sent her a casual text, something innocuous about catching up over coffee, knowing that a public place would be best for this initial conversation. The reply came quickly, positive and easygoing. My heart, which had been a leaden weight in my chest for days, fluttered with a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation. This was it. The real work was about to begin. When we met, the cafe was bustling, a comforting cacophony that helped mask the intensity of our conversation. After the usual pleasantries, I dove straight in, my voice low and steady, recounting the betrayal in stark, unvarnished terms. I showed her the photo, the damning text message, and described Mark's pathetic attempts at denial. I watched her face as I spoke, seeing the initial shock morph into a look of cold fury, her eyes narrowing with a shared indignation. Sarah, I realized, was even more perfect for this than I had initially thought. She had a strong sense of justice, a deep-seated intolerance for liars and cheats. So, I finished, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm not asking you to hurt him physically. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. But I want him to feel what it's like to be utterly played, to have his ego shattered, to be exposed for the pathetic, deceitful man he is. I paused, letting my words hang in the air, allowing her to process the full weight of my request. And I think you're the only person who can help me do it. Sarah listened intently, her gaze unwavering. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When I was done, she took a long sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful. So, you want to set him up, she said, her voice calm, almost meditative. With me. Precisely, I confirmed, a flicker of hope igniting within me. He's attracted to confidence, to a challenge. He's also incredibly arrogant, completely convinced of his own irresistible charm. He wouldn't for a second consider that a woman he was pursuing might be interested in someone else, let alone a woman. I explained my theory about his narrow worldview, his assumption of heteronormativity. You're beautiful, charismatic, and completely out of his league in terms of character. He'll fall for it, Sarah. He'll fall hard. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face, a glint of mischief dancing in her eyes. It wasn't a cruel smile, but one of intelligent understanding, of a shared desire to right a wrong. And what exactly is the calmer part of this plan? She asked, her voice laced with an intriguing blend of curiosity and amusement. The calmer, I explained, leaning back, a dark satisfaction blooming in my chest, is that he thinks he's successfully moved on, found someone new, someone exciting. He'll invest, he'll pursue, he'll brag. And then, at the peak of his smug self-satisfaction, you pull the rug out from under him. Not by rejecting him, Sarah. Oh no. by revealing that his pursuit was futile because your true interest lies elsewhere, with a woman. And then, the final twist, you reveal that the woman is me. The last part hung in the air, a delicious, shocking revelation. Sarah's eyebrows shot up, her eyes widening in genuine surprise, then quickly narrowing again as the full genius and audacity of the plan sunk in. A low chuckle escaped her lips, growing into a full-blown laugh, rich and genuine. "You are truly devious," she said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "I love it. I'm in." A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of exhilaration. The chess pieces were moving. The game was truly afoot. And with Sarah on my side, I knew Mark didn't stand a chance. The trap was being meticulously constructed, brick by agonizing brick, and he, the unsuspecting mouse, was already sniffing the bait. With Sarah on board, the planning shifted from theoretical musings to concrete strategy. We spent hours dissecting Mark's habits, his ego triggers, and his predictable patterns of behavior. Sarah, with her keen observational skills, absorbed every detail I provided, from his favorite coffee shop to the specific compliments he responded to best. This wasn't about a simple setup, it was about crafting a narrative, a performance so convincing that Mark would not only fall for it but would actively participate in his own downfall, completely oblivious. Our first objective was to engineer a chance encounter. Mark frequented a specific, upscale bar downtown on Thursday nights, a place where he liked to see and be seen, where he could cultivate his image as a successful, eligible bachelor. This was our stage. Sarah would accidentally bump into him there. We planned her outfit, sophisticated, alluring, but not overtly provocative. The goal was to pique his interest, to make him curious, rather than immediately assume she was just another conquest. We rehearsed scenarios, perfecting subtle cues. Sarah would feign slight awkwardness at first, then warmth, then a playful challenge. She'd be intelligent, engaging, and just a little bit elusive. The key was to make him feel like he was the one doing the pursuing, the one winning her over, thus feeding his insatiable ego. We decided on a particular topic of conversation, art, specifically modern abstract expressionism, something he knew little about but would pretend to be an expert in, allowing Sarah to subtly highlight his superficiality without him realizing it. The night of the chance encounter arrived. I was a nervous wreck, pacing my apartment, checking my phone every 5 minutes. Sarah, on the other hand, was cool, calm, and collected, radiating an almost theatrical excitement. She texted me when she arrived at the bar, then again when she spotted Mark. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The first domino. Hours later, a text came through, "Mission accomplished. He's hooked." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Sarah recounted the evening in vivid detail. She'd tripped near his table, spilling a little of her drink, apologizing profusely. He, ever the gentleman, had helped her, and the conversation had flowed from there. She'd played her part flawlessly, feigning admiration for his insights into art, then subtly challenging him with a well-placed, intelligent question that clearly caught him off guard. He'd stumbled, recovered, and then, predictably, tried to impress her with stories of his work success and international travel. He practically drooled, Sarah reported, a hint of disdain in her voice. And he's already talking about a second date. He thinks he's got me wrapped around his little finger. It's almost too easy. A dark satisfaction bloomed in my chest. "Good," I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. "The easier he thinks it is, the harder the fall will be." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Mark's romance blossomed, meticulously orchestrated by me from the sidelines. Sarah provided me with a daily debrief, a play-by-play of their dates, his increasingly confident pronouncements of how amazing she was, how different from other women. He was falling, just as I predicted, head over heels into the trap. He was showering her with attention, with small gifts, with grand gestures, all the things he had stopped doing for me long ago. Each report was a fresh sting of betrayal, but also a renewed surge of vindication. He was investing, emotionally and financially, in a relationship that was a carefully constructed lie. I instructed Sarah to maintain a delicate balance, to be warm and engaging, but to always keep a sliver of mystery. To encourage his pursuit, but never to fully commit. to let him believe he was making progress, but to always leave him wanting more. She was a master of the subtle art of attraction and withholding, and Mark, blinded by his ego, was completely oblivious to the strings being pulled. He was so busy congratulating himself on his catch that he never once suspected he was the one being caught. The hook was set, deep and firm, and the line was about to be reeled in. The reports from Sarah became increasingly detailed, almost agonizingly so. Mark was completely infatuated, a puppet dancing to our tune. He'd text her constantly, send flowers to her office, and plan elaborate dates. He even started talking about introducing her to his family, a significant step that he had, ironically, always procrastinated on with me. Each revelation was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a painful reminder of the love and attention he had withheld from me, the effort he had ceased to make. On the other hand, it was proof that the plan was working, that his emotional investment was deepening, setting him up for a truly spectacular fall. Sarah, bless her cunning heart, played her part flawlessly. She'd string him along with just enough encouragement to keep him hopeful, while subtly creating an air of unavailability. She'd cancel last minute for important work commitments or mention old friends she was meeting, keeping him slightly off balance, making him work harder for her attention. This only fueled his desire. Mark, ever the hunter, saw her elusive nature not as a warning sign, but as a challenge to be conquered. He was so focused on the chase, on the validation of winning someone so desirable, that he missed every single red flag. One evening, Sarah called me, her voice barely containing her amusement. "You're not going to believe what he did tonight," she said, a giggle escaping her lips. "He took me to that ridiculously overpriced French restaurant, the one he always said was too fancy for a casual weeknight." My stomach twisted. That was our special occasion restaurant, the place he'd taken me for our anniversaries. The irony was a bitter pill. And then, she continued, he started talking about future plans. Like, when we go to Paris kind of future plans. I clenched my jaw, a cold fury settling over me. He's really going all in, isn't he? "Oh, he's practically swimming in it," Sarah confirmed. He even tried to hold my hand across the table, and I swear, he had this look on his face like he'd just won the lottery. He's so incredibly pleased with himself. That was it. That was the moment. The smug satisfaction on his face, the casual way he was offering future dreams to someone else that he'd denied me. It solidified my resolve. The time for the final act was approaching. We couldn't let him get *2 invested, or the blow might not land as cleanly. The goal wasn't to completely destroy him, but to deliver a precise, humiliating, and unforgettable lesson. "Okay, Sarah," I said, my voice low and steady. "It's time. The next date. That's when we execute the final phase." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, a shared breath of anticipation. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a delicious excitement. "Are you ready to pull the trigger?" "I'm ready," I affirmed, a chill running down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was exhilaration. He's at his peak of confidence, his ego inflated beyond measure. This is the perfect moment to burst his bubble. We meticulously planned the setting for the final reveal. It had to be public enough to ensure maximum impact on his ego, but not so public as to cause a scene. A quiet, yet popular, wine bar he frequented was chosen. Sarah would arrange a casual drink with him, just the two of them. She would lead him on, making him believe this was the night she would finally succumb to his charms, perhaps even hinting at a deeper connection. And then, at the precise moment, I would make my entrance. The thought of his face when he saw me, when he realized the entire elaborate charade, filled me with a perverse joy. He would be humiliated, confused, and utterly exposed. The man who had so carelessly shattered my world would finally have his own world turned upside down. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a delicious tension building inside me. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on Mark's grand humiliation. He had no idea the performance of a lifetime was about to unfold, with him as the unwitting, pathetic star. The day of the big reveal dawned, a crisp autumn afternoon that felt charged with an almost palpable energy. I dressed carefully, not in anything overtly dramatic, but in an outfit that exuded quiet confidence and an undeniable air of having moved on. A simple, elegant dress, a subtle touch of makeup. The goal was to look effortlessly put together, a stark contrast to the disheveled, heartbroken woman he had last seen. I wanted him to see me and recognize the strength he had underestimated, the resolve he had completely ignored. My heart was a drum in my chest, a frantic beat of nerves and adrenaline. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, of suppressed anger, of meticulous execution. Sarah and I had gone over the final details countless times. She would arrive at the wine bar first, secure a table, and engage Mark in conversation. I would arrive precisely 10 minutes after them, giving them enough time to settle in, for Mark to feel comfortable, perhaps even a little smug about his catch. I arrived at the wine bar, my hands clammy, but my resolve firm. I peered through the window, my eyes scanning the interior. There they were. Mark, leaning forward, a confident smirk on his face, gesturing expansively. Sarah, smiling, head tilted, an expression of captivating interest on her face that I knew was a masterful performance. He looked entirely at ease, completely oblivious. A wave of cold satisfaction washed over me. Perfect. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The soft murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the warm scent of wine and roasted nuts, it all faded into the background as my eyes locked onto their table. Mark was mid-sentence, his back partially to me. Sarah, however, saw me immediately. Her eyes flickered with a knowing glint, a silent acknowledgement of our shared purpose. She gave me the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. I walked slowly, deliberately, towards their table, my footsteps echoing in my own ears. Mark was still talking, oblivious, lost in the sound of his own voice. Sarah, meanwhile, subtly shifted her gaze, allowing her eyes to linger on me for a moment longer than was casual. This was the cue. This was the moment. As I drew level with their table, I paused. Mark finally seemed to sense a presence, and he turned, his smile still plastered on his face, ready to greet whoever was interrupting his charming monologue. His eyes met mine, and in that instant, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The smile faltered, then vanished, replaced by an expression of utter shock, confusion, and dawning horror. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen, almost ghostly. "Mark," I said, my voice clear and steady, devoid of any emotion, a stark contrast to the tempest raging inside me. "Fancy meeting you here." He stammered, a pathetic, strangled sound escaping his throat. What are you doing here?" His eyes darted from me to Sarah, then back to me, a desperate search for an explanation, any explanation, that would make sense of the impossible tableau before him. Sarah, ever the professional, chose that precise moment to deliver her lines. She reached across the table, not for Mark's hand, but for mine. Her fingers intertwined with mine, a tender, intimate gesture that spoke volumes. She squeezed my hand gently, a silent signal of triumph. Then she turned to Mark, her smile wide and genuine, radiating warmth. "Oh, Mark," she purred, her voice dripping with a sweetness that was almost venomous. "I'm so glad you got to meet my girlfriend. This is, protagonist's name." The words hung in the air, a bell tolling Mark's undoing. His eyes widened to saucers, his face contorting in a mixture of disbelief, horror, and utter humiliation. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had been pursuing, flattering, and making future plans with was not only in a relationship, but that relationship was with his ex. The entire elaborate charade, the weeks of his ego being stroked, the investment he had poured into this perfect new woman, it was all a meticulously crafted trap. And he had walked right into it. The silence at the table was deafening, punctuated only by the triumphant beat of my own heart. Karma, I thought, was truly a beautiful bitch. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the distant murmur of the wine bar and the frantic thumping of Mark's heart, which I could almost hear from across the table. His eyes darted between Sarah and me, a desperate, frantic search for a loophole, a hidden camera, anything to suggest this was some elaborate, cruel prank. But the unwavering sincerity in Sarah's gaze, the firm, undeniable clasp of her hand in mine, spelled out his horrifying reality. His face, already pale, turned a mottled shade of red, a mixture of embarrassment and impotent rage. The smug confidence that had been his defining feature just moments before had completely evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic shell of a man. He looked utterly deflated, like a balloon that had been suddenly pricked. It was a sight more satisfying than any fantasy I had ever conjured. What is this?" he finally choked out, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. He looked at me, then at Sarah, his eyes pleading for an explanation, for a way out of this nightmare. Sarah, ever the poised performer, squeezed my hand again, a silent confirmation of our victory. She turned her full attention to Mark, her expression now a blend of gentle pity and a subtle, almost imperceptible amusement. "This, Mark," she said, her voice soft but firm, "is what you get when you treat people like disposable objects. This is what happens when you build your happiness on deceit." She paused, letting the words sink in, watching him squirm. "You see, I don't date men. And even if I did, I certainly wouldn't date a man who cheats on his partner, then gaslights them, and then acts like he's the world's greatest catch." His eyes widened in shock, the full weight of her words hitting him. He had been so convinced of his own charm, so blinded by his ego, that he hadn't even considered the possibility that the woman he was so diligently pursuing had a completely different set of romantic preferences, let alone a connection to his past. The layers of his self-deception were peeling away, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. I remained silent, allowing Sarah to deliver the coup de grace. This was her moment, her final act in our carefully choreographed play. She had invested her time and talent, and she deserved the satisfaction of seeing his reaction firsthand. I just stood there, my hand in hers, a silent, unyielding monument to his betrayal and my ultimate vindication. "You really thought you could just move on, sweep everything under the rug, and find someone new to impress?" Sarah continued, her voice gaining a little more edge. "You really thought you were so clever, so irresistible, that no one would ever see through your act?" She shook her head slowly, a look of genuine disappointment on her face. "I'm not interested in your empty promises, Mark. And quite frankly, after everything I've heard, I'm not interested in you at all." His gaze finally returned to me, filled with a mixture of anger, hurt, and profound humiliation. You set me up," he accused, the words barely audible. "You did this." I finally spoke, my voice calm, almost serene. "You cheated, Mark. You lied. You broke my heart and then tried to make me feel crazy for finding out. This isn't a setup. This is a consequence. This is karma." I looked him directly in the eyes, allowing him to see the cold, unyielding resolve that had replaced my pain. "You built this house of cards, Mark. We just gave it a little push." He stared at us, utterly defeated. His shoulders slumped, his gaze falling to the table. The vibrant, confident man who had walked into the wine bar was gone, replaced by a pathetic, humiliated shell. The silence returned, heavy with the weight of his shattered ego. This wasn't just a breakup, it was the public dismantling of his carefully constructed persona, a public stripping of his perceived charm and desirability. And it was glorious. The silence that followed my pronouncement was thick with the weight of Mark's utter defeat. He sat there, slumped in his chair, looking utterly broken, like a marionette whose strings had been abruptly cut. The color had completely drained from his face again, leaving it a sickly, ashen gray. His eyes, usually so full of self-assurance, were now wide with a mixture of disbelief and a profound, dawning horror. He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, to disappear from the public humiliation that was unfolding around him. Sarah, still holding my hand, finally released it, a subtle signal that her part in the performance was complete. She stepped back slightly, giving Mark the full, unobstructed view of me. It was my turn to deliver the final, crushing blow. "You see, Mark," I began, my voice clear and steady, devoid of any wavering emotion. "When you break someone's trust, when you betray them so completely, you don't just hurt them. You change them. You harden them. And sometimes, you awaken a part of them they never knew existed." I took a step closer to the table, leaning slightly, my gaze never leaving his. "I loved you, Mark. I gave you everything. And you threw it away for a cheap thrill, for a fleeting moment of self-gratification. He flinched, as if my words were physical blows. He tried to speak, to offer some pathetic defense, but no sound emerged. His mouth just opened and closed, a silent, desperate fish out of water. You thought you were so clever, I continued, a slow, cold smile touching my lips. You thought you could lie, cheat, and then just walk away, leaving me to pick up the pieces while you moved on to your next conquest. You thought you could erase me, erase us, and pretend none of it ever happened. My voice hardened, a steel edge creeping in. But I decided that wasn't going to happen. I decided you needed to understand the true cost of your actions. I gestured subtly towards Sarah, who was now standing with an air of quiet triumph. Sarah is an amazing woman. Intelligent, beautiful, kind. Everything you pretended to be. And you, in your arrogance, walked right into her trap, thinking you were the one doing the charming, the conquering. I shook my head slowly, a look of profound disappointment on my face, not for myself, but for him. You were so desperate for validation, so eager to rebuild your shattered ego, that you couldn't see the truth even when it was staring you in the face. His head dropped, his gaze fixed on the table, unable to meet my eyes. He looked utterly defeated, humiliated beyond measure. The weight of his own actions, amplified by the public exposure, was clearly crushing him. This wasn't just about losing Sarah. It was about losing face, about his carefully curated image of himself as an irresistible ladies' man being utterly shattered. This isn't about revenge, Mark, I said, though a small, dark part of me knew it was absolutely about revenge, and it felt incredibly sweet. This is about justice. This is about showing you that actions have consequences. That you can't just leave a trail of broken hearts and expect to walk away unscathed. I took one last look at him, at the pathetic, broken man he had become. The satisfaction was immense, a deep, resonant hum of vindication that settled in my bones. I hope you learn from this, Mark, I finished, my voice devoid of any lingering affection or malice, just a cool, detached finality. Because I certainly have. With that, I turned, and Sarah, without a word, fell into step beside me. We walked out of the wine bar, leaving Mark alone amidst the clinking glasses and the murmur of other patrons, a solitary figure consumed by the bitter ashes of his own hubris. As we stepped out into the cool evening air, a profound sense of lightness washed over me. The burden of betrayal, of anger, of hurt, had finally lifted. I felt free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely, powerful. The chapter of Mark was closed, sealed with a kiss of exquisite, undeniable karma. Stepping out of the wine bar, the cool evening air felt invigorating, a crisp balm against the lingering heat of my anger. The weight that had pressed down on me for weeks, the suffocating burden of betrayal and the meticulous planning of revenge, had finally lifted. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it felt like pure, unadulterated oxygen. Sarah walked beside me, her arm linking through mine, a silent gesture of solidarity and triumph. We didn't speak immediately. There was no need for words. The shared glance between us was enough, a silent communication of a mission accomplished, a wrong righted. The air around us seemed to hum with the echoes of Mark's shattered ego, a symphony of vindication that played only for us. As we walked, the initial rush of adrenaline began to subside, replaced by a profound sense of calm. It wasn't the giddy high of a fleeting victory, but the deep, satisfying peace that comes from achieving a difficult, necessary objective. I looked at Sarah, her face illuminated by the streetlights, a mischievous glint still in her eyes. "You were brilliant," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion, but also with genuine admiration. "Absolutely brilliant." She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "You too." That final speech was pure gold. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. She paused, then chuckled softly. A very well-dressed, very calm, very vengeful ghost. We walked a few more blocks, the silence comfortable now, punctuated by the distant city sounds. My mind replayed the scene, Mark's crumpled face, his desperate, pleading eyes. There was no remorse, no lingering sadness, only a deep, quiet satisfaction. I had wanted him to feel something, to truly understand the pain he had inflicted. And in that moment, seeing his humiliation, I knew I had succeeded. "So," Sarah said, breaking the silence, her tone lighter now, "what's next for you?" The question hung in the air, a gateway to a future I hadn't truly allowed myself to consider beyond the immediate goal of revenge. For weeks, every thought, every action, had been consumed by Mark, by his betrayal, by the plan to make him pay. Now, with that chapter decisively closed, a vast, open expanse stretched before me. "I don't know," I admitted, a small, genuine smile forming on my lips. "For the first time in a long time, I actually feel free. Free to figure that out." The anger, which had been a driving force for so long, had dissipated, leaving behind a clear, unburdened space. It was a strange sensation, like shedding a heavy cloak. I realized that the revenge, while satisfying, wasn't just about hurting Mark. It was about reclaiming my own power, my own narrative. It was about proving to myself that I was not a victim, that I was strong, capable, and resilient. "Good," Sarah said, squeezing my arm. "You deserve that. You really do." We eventually reached a crosswalk, and the light turned green. As we stepped onto the street, I felt a lightness in my step, a sense of possibility that had been absent for far too long. The world, which had seemed so bleak and colorless in the aftermath of Mark's betrayal, now glimmered with new potential. The journey had been dark, fueled by pain and anger, but it had led me to a place of unexpected liberation. I had faced my demons, confronted my betrayer, and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and undeniably, beautifully vindicated. The future was unwritten, but for the first time, I felt ready to write my own story, free from the shadows of the past. The days that followed were a fascinating blend of emotional detox and strategic rediscovery. The initial euphoria of the reveal slowly mellowed into a profound sense of inner peace. I found myself sleeping soundly for the first time in months, undisturbed by the nightmares of infidelity or the frantic mental replays of betrayal. The constant hum of anxiety that had been my unwelcome companion had finally quieted. It was as if a deeply infected wound had finally been lanced, allowing the healing to begin. I started by reclaiming my space. Our shared apartment, once a painful reminder of shattered dreams, now felt like a blank canvas. I moved Mark's remaining belongings into boxes, not with anger, but with a quiet, almost ritualistic detachment. Each item packed away was another layer of the past shed, another step towards my independent future. I rearranged furniture, bought new plants, and invested in vibrant, colorful art that spoke to my own taste, not our combined aesthetic. The apartment slowly transformed into a sanctuary, a true reflection of my personality, unburdened by his presence. Beyond the physical changes, there was an intense period of self-reflection. I found myself re-evaluating everything: my definition of love, my boundaries, my expectations in a relationship. The betrayal, as agonizing as it was, had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, my own blind spots. I realized I had, perhaps, given too much, trusted too easily, and overlooked warning signs in my desire for a perfect partnership. This wasn't about blaming myself, but about learning, about growing. I was determined that this experience, however painful, would make me stronger, not bitter. My friendships, which had understandably taken a backseat during the tumultuous period of Mark's betrayal and my subsequent plotting, began to flourish again. I reconnected with friends I had inadvertently distanced myself from, sharing my story, not with bitterness, but with a newfound clarity and a touch of dark humor. Their support was invaluable, a reminder that I was surrounded by genuine love and unwavering loyalty. Sarah, of course, became an unexpected, cherished friend. Our shared experience had forged a unique bond, and we often found ourselves laughing over the sheer audacity of our plan, marveling at Mark's cluelessness. "You know," Sarah remarked one evening over wine, "he actually tried to text me a few days after. Something about understanding and needing to talk." She rolled her eyes. "I just blocked him. The show's over, darling. No encores." I chuckled, a genuine, unforced sound. "Good. He doesn't deserve another moment of your time. Or mine." The thought of Mark, once a source of searing pain, now evoked only a detached sense of pity. He was likely still reeling, his ego bruised, his carefully constructed world in disarray. But that was his burden, not mine. My focus was squarely on my own healing, my own future. I started exploring new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but never made time for. Painting, hiking, even a beginner's cooking class. Each new experience was a small victory, a testament to my burgeoning independence. I was rediscovering myself, peeling back the layers of the us that had defined my life for so long, and finding a vibrant, resilient me underneath. The journey from profound betrayal to meticulous revenge had been a dark and winding path, but it had ultimately led me to a place of profound self-discovery and an exhilarating sense of freedom. The future, once shrouded in the despair of a broken heart, now shimmered with endless possibilities, waiting to be explored. As the weeks turned into months, the memory of Mark and the elaborate revenge plot began to recede, not into oblivion, but into a more distant, less emotionally charged part of my past. It was like looking at an old photograph. The details were still clear, but the raw emotions of the moment had faded, replaced by a quiet understanding of the lessons learned. The experience had carved new contours into my personality, leaving me sharper, more discerning, and fiercely protective of my peace. One of the most significant shifts was in my perception of relationships. I no longer rushed into things, no longer idealized partners, no longer sought external validation to complete myself. I had learned to be comfortable in my own company, to find joy in my own pursuits, and to truly understand what I deserved in a partner. The idea of settling for anything less than genuine respect, honesty, and mutual effort became unthinkable. My standards had risen, forged in the crucible of betrayal. I continued to build my life, brick by independent brick. My career, which had suffered from my emotional turmoil, began to thrive as my focus returned. I took on new projects, embraced challenges, and found a renewed sense of purpose in my work. It was satisfying to see tangible progress, to know that I was building something real and sustainable for myself. Sarah and I maintained our friendship, a unique bond cemented by our shared secret and the peculiar adventure we had embarked upon. We'd often reminisce, sharing a knowing look or a quiet chuckle when a topic of conversation inadvertently touched upon the themes of trust or comeuppance. Our inside joke about karma delivery services became a source of endless amusement. She was a constant reminder of my strength and the power of female solidarity. Occasionally, I would hear whispers about Mark through mutual acquaintances, vague reports of him being different, quieter, or less confident. He hadn't publicly acknowledged the setup, of course, but the impact was evident in his diminished presence, his less boisterous demeanor. The public dismantling of his ego had clearly left a lasting scar. He hadn't been physically harmed, but the blow to his pride, to his very sense of self, had been devastating. And that, to me, was the most satisfying outcome. He was forced to confront the consequences of his actions, not through my tears, but through his own public humiliation. I never sought him out, never checked his social media, never allowed myself to dwell on his fate. My focus remained steadfastly on my own growth, my own happiness. The revenge had been a necessary step in my healing process, a way to reclaim my agency, but it was not the destination. The true victory lay in my ability to move forward, to build a fulfilling life free from the shadows of his betrayal. Looking back, the journey from profound betrayal to meticulous revenge had been a dark and challenging path. It had forced me to confront my deepest pain, to tap into a well of cunning and resolve I never knew I possessed. But ultimately, it had led me to a place of unexpected strength and profound self-discovery. It was a testament to the fact that even in the darkest moments, there is an opportunity for transformation. I had not only survived, I had thrived. And as I looked out at the world, brimming with possibility, I knew that the best chapters of my story were still waiting to be written. The past was a closed book, and the future, vibrant and wide open, was mine for the taking.